before. Thank you for joining us. We will be recording tonight's webinar so that we can upload it onto the website tomorrow. I'm going to hand over to Will very shortly, but just a quick bit of housekeeping. Tonight is we've got a lot of information to share with you tonight, a lot of information. So we won't be taking any questions tonight in the chat or other. But there will be multiple opportunities for you to ask us questions through the consultation address, as well as the hour webinars that the hour meetings we'll be seeing you at very soon, and the consultation events. So that's why that function isn't available tonight. Without further ado, I am going to hand you over to Will Gallagher this evening. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Sarah said, we thought it was important to put a couple of these briefing sessions in for members of the local representative groups sort of this evening and tomorrow evening. No need to attend both if you don't want to. They will cover exactly the same material, but it was just to ensure that we've sort of set out for you the sort of highlights or the sort of key elements of the consultation, because tomorrow and at 1 minute past midnight, either tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on how you see it, we'll be publishing quite a lot of information. And so we wanted to provide the sort of summary to you, hopefully to make it as accessible as possible. So over the course of the evening now, we'll talk a little bit about actually our plans for the consultation itself. We will then talk about some route-wide themes. We'll then do a canter through each of the route sections. We won't be able to talk about all the detail that is in the consultation, but I will pull out the sort of key areas, as I say, to help you be prepared. And then we'll talk about some next steps as well. So as we move on to the next slide, Sarah, we're going to be holding 16 in-person events throughout the consultation. Those have been published on our website, and people should be now receiving postcards through their doors. Certainly, I'm having conversations with people who are receiving the postcards through their doors, advertising these events. We hope we found a good mix across weekdays, evenings, and weekends. We'll make sure that at each one of those events, there will be a 1 hour preview with local representative groups at the start. So whilst today is designed to be a briefing, what we're planning is to make sure we can have good quality conversations and answer your questions. Each of those 16 events will be preceded by a 1 hour preview that explicitly reserved for local representative group members. So hopefully making sure that way that you do have the opportunity to ask your questions and to speak to a range of our sort of subject matter experts in that 1 hour preview. And there will at those events be a sort of set of material, the consultation documents, feedback forms, and fact sheets. So we've produced fact sheets that sort of summarize in 1 or 2 pages the key positions that we're taking. So as I move us on, you can see there the list of 16 events spread across the Oxford, Milton Keynes, Bedford, Cambridge geographies, and split, as I say, before Christmas and after Christmas, and across weekdays, evenings, and weekends. As I move us on to the next slide, also a virtual consultation room, so that will go live tomorrow, and that will be live throughout the consultation and will contain the same information that you will find in the physical consultation rooms. And we will also hold a series of online events throughout the consultation, one in November, one in December, one in January. And so it is designed to make sure we engage with as many people as we possibly can through this consultation process. As we move on, I think the other thing to say is just to sort of sketch out that we are on a trajectory now, particularly following the Chancellor's commitment to delivering East West Rail in the budget. We are now on a trajectory through from a non-statutory consultation starting tomorrow through to a statutory consultation roughly this time next year, through to a DCO application in late 26, early 27. And the three key elements of that, the design of the railway, the environmental impacts, and the traffic and transport impacts, are now, you'll see in the documents that we're going to produce, those documents are on a trajectory of increasing maturity, increasing quantification to take us through from the information we're providing now through to enhanced information at the statutory consultation through to the DCO application. So a clear trajectory for those key elements of the scheme. And so, as I say, that is designed to help people see how the application is going to develop. As I move us on to the next slide, I'll just do a little bit on some of the sort of route-wide themes. So really just a summary of the train services that we are going to be running, and we're consulting on two options for our train services, some of which are common to both. So there are 2 trains an hour from Oxford to Milton Keynes. Those are the services that will open next year, and those we've started running the test trains on those, but those services will open next year. There will then be 2 train services that go all the way from Oxford through to Cambridge. So those are the dark blue lines. And then depending on the options, there will be services that run from Stewartby through to Cambridge. You'll note that is a change because historically we thought they might run from Bedford, but we've actually, for a number of reasons, been able to extend those services back so they start at Stewartby rather than Bedford. It provides better connectivity to Bedford St John's and the hospital. It reduces the footprint that we need at Bedford, and given potential developments in the Stewartby area, it provides a more frequent service. And so there will be Stewartby to Cambridge services. There will either be 1 or 2 of those. In the first option, you can see that there are 2 of them, and then there is the additional existing stopping service on the Marston Vale line. So that's the existing stations option on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, if we consolidate the stations on the Marston Vale line, one of those Stewartby Cambridge will be amalgamated with the stopping service and brought all the way back to Bletchley. So those are the 2 sort of train service patterns that we are proposing in this consultation. As we move forward onto the next slide, you may have seen in terms of electrification, we made an announcement a couple of weeks ago that we will be electrifying East West Rail with an emerging preference for discontinuous electrification. So that means you get the environmental benefits of electrification, but because we're able to use a hybrid battery electric train, you don't need electric wires, overhead wires everywhere, because you can rely on the battery in some places. That has the impact of reducing the cost. It also reduces the disruption from construction in some key areas where we wouldn't have to raise bridges and those sorts of things. And it also reduces visual impact as well. So pleased to confirm that once we run the full service to Cambridge, it will be an electrified railway. As we move on, really just sort of restating our position on freight. I don't think our position on freight has changed. Well, I know it hasn't changed since the route update announcement, which is maintaining the existing freight services and then look at, the increased future freight demand. And again, we're continuing to provide as we were for that. As I move us on to the next slide, construction. I know this is going to be, an understandable area that people want to engage with us on, and undoubtedly, we are, this is going to be a source of sort of questions. We do set out at a very high level our approach to construction. I think the only thing I really wanted to say here was that we will be sort of continuing to engage with communities and businesses potentially affected by the proposals. And we will flesh out in more detail as the design develops the sort of detailed construction plans, and that we will set out, as I say, in more detail over the course of this consultation and the statutory consultation. And it is, as part of our DCO application, that our code of construction practice will be submitted. So that is what we are working towards. What isn't going to be in the consultation tomorrow is sort of detailed, this number of HGVs on this road at this time. We are not at that level of development yet in the scheme. That comes later in the process. And so really just to flag that there will be, some description and some qualitative assessment of the traffic and transport impacts, but that continues to be something that we work on, and more information will be available at the statutory consultation. That is part of the normal design development of the scheme. As we move on, just wanted to touch on a sort of homes, land and property. So we are, as I've said, publishing a lot more information about this scheme, and we will be publishing what is known as the draft order limits. So that is the red line boundary. It's the boundary of the land that we need to take both permanently, but also on a temporary basis, for example, for construction compounds and those sorts of things. We will also be publishing not just that boundary, which gives you the sort of horizontal position of the railway, what land it's taking, but we'll also be publishing the profile, so the vertical alignment, so heights and depths of embankments and cuttings and those sorts of things. So with that, the Secretary of State for Transport will tomorrow in Parliament set out a safeguarding direction which safeguards the land on which the route is going. That has planning implications for those people making planning applications in the area, but it also triggers the statutory blight provisions. So what that means is there will be, for those who are directly affected by the railway, there will now be, from tomorrow morning, statutory blight. The statutory blight regime will apply. So that means if people do want to sell their property, starting from tomorrow, they will be able to go through that statutory blight process. And that does, compared to the scheme that we've had in place to date, the need to sell scheme, it is in effect a want to sell scheme. So it lowers the bar in terms of qualifying, and it does provide improved compensation as well. So that is a better scheme for those who are directly affected. And for those who are not directly affected, our need to sell scheme continues to apply. So again, as the progress to the scheme becoming more certain, we are improving the arrangements in relation to homes, land and property. I'm going to move us forward. And just to note, because I know it will be a a question that people have. So we are aware that Universal are exploring the potential to develop a theme park next to the Marston Vale line, just by Stuartby. Just to be really clear, and it is absolutely intentional, that our proposals for consultation at this stage do not reflect this scheme because it has not yet been brought forward and has not been consented. That is not to say we are just ignoring it. We have had active discussions with Universal to understand the implications of the theme park and resort for the project. So were it to go ahead, we understand what that would look like, and we would be able to bring forward at the next stage of consultation proposals on that basis. But until it comes forward, we took the view that the right thing to do was that our proposals at this consultation do not reflect the Universal scheme, because, as I say, it has not yet been brought forward. So I move us on to the next slide and into the next section. So really, this is an opportunity for me just to walk you through sort of the key elements of the consultation between Oxford and Cambridge. We've broken it down into 8 sections. You'll see that in the documentation tomorrow. As I say, I'm not tonight going to be able to pull out all the details, but I will try to pull out some of the key issues sort of based upon the conversations that we've had with you over the course of the last few months and indeed years, to try to reflect what is in the consultation as we move forward. So I'll launch into that onto the next couple of slides, looking at Oxford to Bletchley. And if we just jump onto the next slide here. So this really is the section of the railway where not a significant amount of upgrade, on the basis that we have been doing quite a lot of work in this area to get connection stage 1 to work. If we just move on to the next slide, I think this just gives me a run through of the key things. So 1, in the Oxford station area, not proposing significant infrastructure development at Oxford, because we are working on a cross-industry basis to identify operational solutions there, one of which may include East-West Rail services running further south of Oxford, either to Didcot or to Cowley. So yeah, not significant new infrastructure in the Oxford station area, but an operational solution. We are testing that the existing stations on the line have the capacity they need to meet future demand, considering what is required for future years. We will be making provision for train crew accommodation. In this section between Oxford and Bletchley, also, there is the level crossing at London Road Bicester, and we'll come on to that in a second. We're putting passing loops in the Islip and Middle Claydon area, and we may need to provide some diversion for overhead electricity utilities necessary along the route. So as I move us on, actually what I'll do very briefly is, sorry, I thought there was a slide on the London Road level crossing, but let me very quickly just touch on that. At London Road level crossing, what we are proposing are a couple of options at the crossing itself. Either a bridge to go over the railway for pedestrian cyclists, or an underpass to go under the existing railway. And we have had a look at road bridges in that location, but our analysis has concluded that the right option at London Road level crossing is to use the existing road network, but to provide enhancements to that existing road network in order to divert traffic. So that is, and that is going to be an ongoing source of engagement during the consultation to understand those traffic enhancements and how that would work. because for the vast majority of routes, for the vast majority of journeys, it is a matter of a couple of 2 to 3 minutes for of a road diversion. That's even before we make those road enhancements. Moving us into the next section, so beyond Bletchley, so the Marston Vale line. So heading out of Bletchley up towards Bedford. And so on the Marston Vale line, we'll be proposing 2 options. I think this is the next slide. Yeah, 2 options for stations. So either retaining the existing 9 stations and the hourly stopping service, which would call at all 9 stations. And then there would be 2 core East-West Rail services that call at 4 of the stations, Woburn Sands, Ridgemont, Lidlington and Sturtby, which on their way between Oxford and Cambridge. So that is one option that we're presenting. The other is to consolidate the 9 existing stations into 4 new sort of modern and more easily accessible stations. Those, as I've highlighted above, Woburn Sands, Ridgemont, Lidlington and Sturtby. And those would be serviced by 3 East-West Rail trains. 2 of these would be an Oxford-Cambridge service. The third would be a Bletchley-Cambridge service. So a choice at the consultation between the existing stations option and the consolidated stations option. Within those consolidated station options, there are some station locations and a couple of options there, which I'll talk you through in a minute. We will, on the Marston Vale line, be needing to upgrade the railway tracks. We will need to make changes to the level crossings in the area. Those changes are broadly in line, pretty much entirely in line, in fact, with the level crossing proposals at the route update announcement last year. I think there's just a couple of differences at sort of Bow Brick Hill. And then we will also need passing loops on the Marston Vale line as well. So as we move on, I think what this sort of just gets into is a bit more detail about the existing stations option, as you can see, which keeps the stopper. And then moving on to the next slide, which shows how that changes if we don't stop at all the existing stations, but instead consolidate. And what that in effect means, going for the consolidated option, obviously doesn't have all 9 stations, but it does mean faster, more frequent, more reliable services to more places for those people sort of living on the Marston Vale line. So it is a, as I say, more frequent, faster service to more places, but recognizing people may prefer the existing station option because of the presence of more stations. So that is a key choice at this consultation, where we're presenting 2 options. As I move us on to the next slides, what these do is they just show you where the stations, if we were to relocate the stations as part of the consolidation, this just shows you where the station would be in Woburn Sands, moved from where you can see the arrow points to the existing station location, just to the west. If we then move on to the next slide, this takes a look at 2 options at Ridgemont. So if we are consolidating stations in the Ridgemont area, option 1 relocates Ridgemont Station to the other side of the M1. You can see that, whereas option 2 puts new station facilities at the current station location. If we move on to the next slide, this looks at Lidlington Station. So again, you can see here that if we are consolidating stations, we would move the existing Lidlington station from its current location a little bit further to the east, just on the edge of the village there. And this is, you know, mainly, as I say, to make sure there's room for the public transport interchange and parking and those sorts of things that sort of are associated with the sort of new station. As we move on to the next slide, then in the Stuartby at Stuartby, a couple of options. Option 1 moves the station sort of marginally north of its current location, whereas option 2 moves the station sort of a little bit further along the line towards Bedford, sort of just north of the Broadmead Road. So hopefully that just gives you a picture of, on the Marston Vale line, both the options for between using the existing stations and building new consolidated stations, and then within the new consolidated stations, what the location options are there for local residents. As I move us on, having a look at the section into Bedford. So a number of works in the Bedford area. So relocating the Bedford St John's station from its current location to the site of the current Britannia Road car park, so therefore much closer to Bedford Hospital, so essentially the Bedford Hospital station. We would build a new multi-storey car park on the hospital-owned land just west of the railway. I think it's worth saying, because I know this has been a question for people, but we would replace like for like the number of car parking places. So the car parking places that are needed for the railway would be replaced on a 1-for-1 basis. And we would do that before taking those car parking spaces away to build the railway. So there would be no loss of car parking spaces at any point for the hospital. We then also have in this area, we're proposing to move Jowett Sidings to Caldwell Walk, for those of you who know the area, because we need to do that to make sure we've got the route for the tracks from Bedford St John's into Bedford Station. We would also be building new infrastructure at Bedford Station itself, so new station building, so upgrading and expanding the Bedford station. And then as we head further north, a viaduct crossing the Great River Ouse and the Paula Radcliffe Way. So if we just flick onto the next slide, this pulls out the detail on Bedford Station itself. So moving the station south toward Ford End Road Bridge, a new station concourse with new East West Rail platforms. As I noted earlier on, because we've been able to extend the services to Stuartby, so moving through Bedford, we've actually managed to reduce the railway footprint here, which has made the use of the site more efficient. I think also worth saying, because I know this has been an important thing for people locally, but the houses on Ashburnham Road that were concerned that they might be need to be purchased or demolished or whatever, those are no longer at risk. So we have found a solution here that means those properties on Ashburnham Road are protected. Obviously in this area also a new multi-storey car park and surface car parking. I'm going to just move us on just to talk about the Poets area, where we are as people know, we are taking the 6-track option north of Bedford to ensure that we can provide a reliable service and ensure that the timetable works for East West Rail. That does, as we know, have an impact in the Poets area. We did test again in the preparation for the consultation whether an alternative solution was possible, and none of the modelling suggests that it is. The number of houses that are to be demolished in this area has not changed. It remains the same as we said at Ruhr. There are a number of properties where we are going to need to take a part of their garden in a way that we were not originally planning, but that is to reflect work that we've done on the sort of road network, turning circles, those sorts of things, to make sure that the traffic movement in the Poets area it works as it needs to do. But as I say, for those houses that are highlighted here, they will benefit from the statutory blight provisions that come into effect tomorrow. I'm going to move us on then to look at the area that moves from Clapham Green up to Colston. We do head north out of Bedford Station, as you're aware, across a series of viaducts, embankments and cuttings, also passing loops in the Colston area, and we will be building new bridges to maintain roads and public rights of way. And there is quite a detailed explanation in the consultation documents of how those public rights of way in particular will be moving, will be sort of protected, and the routes for those. Also worth saying that we have moved the proposed alignment of the railway slightly to the north, and that is motivated to increase the distance from the railway line to the properties in the Wilden area. So we have adjusted the alignment in this area to move it further away from Wilden. So as we move on to the next slide, then looking at Roxton, the Roxton area through to east of St. Neots. So primarily in this area, I'll focus on the alignment in the Tempsford area. So if we move on to the next slide, you will remember at the route update announcement, we confirmed that we had alignment 1, but with a preference for the Tempsford variant that swung south of the Black Cat roundabout and served a potential Tempsford station a little bit further south. So we've had a look here at what the alignment options might be, and we've refined that Tempsford alignment to be alignment 1B. So that's the more southerly of the sort of bright blue lines. But we also developed an alignment 1C that more closely hugs the alignment of the A421. And that is in part because as we begun to investigate alignment 1B a little bit further, that would need to be on quite a significant viaduct in this area, and therefore we wanted to present an option that wasn't on a viaduct for quite so long or quite so high. So we've looked at alignment 1C, which is also a cheaper alignment than alignment 1B, and both locations, even though technically alignment 1C is north of the new 428, which is the purple line. Both of those stations, by the way that they're configured, could serve the area that points more towards Tempsford, because of the potential for a new community in that Tempsford area. So there are two options there that we are consulting on to test people's preferences for where precisely that alignment goes and the positioning of the Tempsford station. As I move us on to the next slide, what I also wanted to sort of draw your attention to is two potential locations for a logistics hub. So this would be a temporary rail logistics hub to allow us to build East West Rail. There are a couple of options there. They do in part rest on which of the alignments is chosen in the Tempsford area. It's one of the reasons why we're consulting on the two, the pink and the blue areas. One of the reasons for having a rail logistics hub in this way and at this location is it would allow us to, once the trace is constructed, it would allow us to bring in more materials by rail rather than by road, and therefore would reduce the amount of construction traffic on the roads, both pointing out from this area towards Bedford and towards Cambridge. So we do see some advantages because of it could have, as I say, beneficial environmental and community impacts in this area. I'll move us on to then have a look at the route section that runs from Croxton through to Toft. And here, this really is about the stretch of the railway that follows the line of the 421, as it will be, over to Cambourne, the construction of a new Cambourne station, and then how the railway turns to the south. So if I just move that on one slide, this shows you the proposed location for the Cambourne station, sort of just north of what is currently the 428, soon to be the 421 at Cambourne. And this is something that we are going to continue to develop to make sure, as plans for the growth of Cambourne come forward, making sure that this is fully integrated into those plans. Again, just a sort of reminder that it would be 4 trains an hour that would be serving Cambourne station, and cutting the morning rush hour is about 50 minutes into town from Cambourne, just to do the 9 miles there. But this would reduce the time to less than 15 minutes from Cambourne. And then moving on, and here I think we are addressing some of the concerns that we heard raised about the route into Cambridge from here. So we would actually put the East West Rail line into a cut and cover tunnel to go under the A428. We would temporarily slightly realign the A428 road so we could construct the cut and cover tunnel, but it would mean we can bring that line through that corner of Bourne Airfield with less disruption, not completely without disruption, but with significantly less disruption in the long term, and also without the visual impact that I know people were concerned about in terms of the potential viaduct there. And this is part of a more general move that we have made to significantly reduce the height of East West Rail as it travels from Camborne through into Cambridge. So as we move on to the next slide, we then come to the route section from Comberton to Shelford. So we obviously construct the new railway that runs from runs past Comberton. It will pass between Comberton and Toft in a cutting now. It then takes a tunnel through Chapel Hill, south of Haslingfield. So I know that was, again, a particular area of concern, and we are able now to confirm that that will be about a 700-metre long tunnel for the railway travelling beneath Chapel Hill. And again, that helps us ensure that we can keep the railway as low as possible travelling through this part of South Cambridgeshire. As I move us on to the next slide, once we get sort of into the Harston area, so Hawkston Junction, what we do is we actually here now the solution that we have come up with in this area means we realign the Shepperth branch line to allow us to create a grade separated junction. We actually, rather than going over the A10, we realign the A10 to go over East West Rail. Allows us to keep East West Rail relatively low. But we do then need to bring the West Anglia main line. We do then need to bring, the Shepperth Branch Royston line in one area up and over, so that we achieve that grade separation at Hawkston Junction. And that grade separation is what then allows us to use the existing line through to Shepperth Junction without needing to widen the Shepperth branch line at this point. What this does mean, and I'll move us on to the next slide, is this actually just describes Hawkston Junction in a bit more detail for those of you who are sort of particularly interested in this area. So as I've said, the Shepperth Branch Royston line would be diverted over East West Rail in this location, but this is all part of us trying to as I say, find the most efficient and effective solution in this area, and also keep the East West Rail as low as possible in the way that we do this. I do want to just touch on two level crossings in this area as well. So if we move on to the next slide, the Harston level crossing on Newton Road. And we've been looking at this very closely, trying to find the best options to avoid separating these two communities. We do realise how important this is to people. So we are presenting two options for people to consider, as well as considering a new accessible footbridge about 400 metres east of the existing Harston level crossing. So a couple of options there. First option is to divert Newton Road to the southwest of the existing road, sort of passing over the Shepperth Branch Royston line's new location before heading west to join the realigned A10. So that is one option. And then the second option is that we build a new road from Station Road to the new location of the London Road, and we would actually use the route of the old Shepperth Branch line track, and that would also include a route for pedestrians and cyclists. And at the moment, we think that option is our emerging preference. And as I say, we've developed that trying to avoid issues of sort of turning right onto the A10, and those I know those were sort of significant considerations for the communities there. So again, a couple of options, but an emerging preference for that sort of second option that I've described. As we move on then to Hawkston Road crossing, so this is where we're proposing to close the Hawkston Road level crossing. The level of traffic of East West Rail does make that crossing unsafe. We have, we recognise how important level crossings are. We also recognise the safety concerns that come with it. And in this location, we can't get to the place where that crossing is safe. So therefore, we would need to close the level crossing. But as you can see on the left of the diagram there, providing a new bridge over the railway just west of Little Shelford, sort of linking the High Street with Newton Road. We're also, as we've set out there, looking at a footbridge at the location of the existing level crossing. So both a road diversion there with a new road built and a footbridge at the crossing. As I move us on, then looking at the route section into Cambridge. So really this picks up where we join the West Anglia Main Line and then head north towards Cambridge. So as we move, if we just move on to the next slide here. So we will need along the West Anglia Main Line to lay 2 new tracks. So that we've got 4 tracking. There's 4 tracking happening around the new Cambridge South Station, but this would mean we have 4 tracking further south and further north of that. Looking north in that direction, we would need to demolish the overbridge at Long Road and build a new bridge that was able to span the 4 tracks. And we do recognise there are blue light considerations there in terms of access to Addenbrooke's Hospital, and so we're working very carefully to make sure we can do that in a way that minimises the disruption. The other thing that we've done here is rather than terminating at Cambridge, we're actually looking to run trains from Cambridge around. If we just go on to the next slide, I think this will oh no, actually, sorry, the map isn't in here, but it is in the consultation document tomorrow. We're actually looking to run for trains to run north of Cambridge Station and around onto the Newmarket line, so towards Cherry Hinton, and putting a new train turnback facility there. What that means is we don't have to do quite as much work at Cambridge Station itself. That saves money and disruption in Cambridge. It also means we start twin tracking on the Newmarket line. We do know that has been an aspiration for some time in this area. And whilst at the moment the scope of the scheme includes a turnback facility just west of Cherry Hinton in the Cambridge area, there is an option, and we know some people are interested in exploring the option of whether that turnback could actually be a station. So that is an option that is sort of up for consideration. And then finally, we are making some small modifications at Cambridge North as well, mainly to reduce the level of disruption whilst we're doing work at Cambridge. So I think that summarises, and I recognise it was a very quick canter through the key headlines of what was in the consultation. What I hope it demonstrates is that whilst we of course, are still having an impact. It's impossible not to when delivering a rail connection on this scale. But we have taken on feedback in quite a number of areas, on the Marston Vale line, trying to move the alignment in the Wilden area, looking at the options around Tempsford and the impact on Roxton there. And then also, as we head towards the approach into Cambridge, a tunnel in the Chapel Hill area, a cut and cover tunnel in the where we cross the A428, and then also opening up the option, as I say, by that turn back in the Cambridge East area, and then particularly demonstrating, the commitment on electrification and moving to that battery electric hybrid solution. So whilst I recognise it won't be welcome news for everyone, and I don't underestimate the disruption that the construction of East West Rail will cause, we are doing everything we can to develop the design in a way that responds to feedback, and that is something that we will continue to do. And that brings us on to the next steps. If we just flick onto the next slide. So what we're proposing is a series of interactive design workshops with statutory stakeholders in terms of host local authorities, environmental bodies, and host parish councils. So we are looking to do sort of interactive workshops with our design teams so that we can, for those host local authorities, environmental bodies, and parish councils, really make sure we are developing the design, to properly collating the feedback and developing the design around those areas of sort of key concern. And we envisage that starting in December of this year, so starting December next month, and then continuing all the way through next year. So quite a significant uptick in our engagement at a sort of technical level in terms of developing the design with those host authorities. If I move us on to the next slide, just one other thing to say is that really important that we get good feedback, and we've tried to find ways to maximize that. We're doing a lot of advertising and promotion of the consultation, whether on bus stops, in newspapers, on Spotify, through those postcards that have been dropping through people's doors. We want people to come to the events, go online, visit the virtual consultation room, and people can provide us that feedback with the form online, emailing us a copy of the feedback form, posting us a copy at a free post address, or also just handing that copy in handing that feedback form in at a consultation event. So, as they trying to find as many ways as possible for people to feedback, and then just to reiterate that opportunity. As I say, I know I've presented a lot of information tonight, and when the consultation lands tomorrow morning, there is quite significant detail on all of these points that we'll be sharing for the first time, and the plan and profile drawings. And that's why at each of the in-person consultation events, each of those 16 events, there will be that first hour which will be reserved for members of the local representative groups to come and ask questions, and to really get into the detail with our subject matter experts as well. So just wanted to reiterate that opportunity, as they having, I reckon, I've spoken at you for quite a clip for the last hour. I think that probably does, if I'm not mistaken, sort of conclude tonight's briefing. Thank you very much. Of course, we at the team here remain sort of keep in contact with us. Sarah, looking after the local representative groups at those events in person. If you've got any questions, do drop us an email. But as I say, a lot of new information about the scheme tomorrow. Some big moves that we hope do continue to refine and make the scheme better. And we look forward to getting your feedback at events and over the course of the next couple of months, with the consultation ending on the 24th of January. At that point, I'm going to say good evening, and as I say, look forward to seeing you soon, particularly at those consultation events.
Thank you, Will, and well done.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.